Like my friend Bodie Elfman, he always teases me and he says, "Hi, my name is Danny Masterson. Would you like to touch my balls?" You know, doing an imitation of me, because certain words
why
you
are
just
you
can't get
asking
away
people
with.
to do that? That's the more important question.
I mean, you got them.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
Accent aside,
Everybody should grab.
That's the more important thing.
Exactly.
I've heard about you. And you'll be caught soon. I know you will.
I will.
Wow, are they prophets or what? That clip was from 2004, and from 2001 to 2004, 3 women went down to the Church of Scientology and later law enforcement to report that Danny Masterson had allegedly raped them. All of these gals were Scientologists. I'm an ex-Scientologist if you're new here. Please check out the Raised in a Secret Society series so you can see my ongoing story. But these new cult clips are designed to answer viewers' questions, because there's a lot of questions that come in that I want to expand upon. And one that came up this week was Danny Masterson. So let's talk about that. Let me introduce you to the case first, and then I'll give you my thoughts and opinions on what's going on, the role that Scientology plays in this thing, and what it's like being a Scientologist during these kind of situations.
Actor and Scientologist Danny Masterson ordered to stand trial on 3 felony counts of rape. Masterson has pleaded not guilty. In her ruling today, the judge specifically cited Scientology policies as a factor in why the women waited so long to report the alleged rapes to law enforcement.
Danny Masterson is accused of assaulting 3 women at his Hollywood Hills home between 2001 and 2003. Well, Masterson remains free tonight on $3 million bail, but today the judge ordered him to surrender his passport. In an earlier hearing, the court found the alleged victims' delays in coming forward were reasonable, given their ties to the Church of Scientology. Masterson and all 3 women are part of that church, we're told. His attorneys claim 2 of the cases were consensual and the 3rd never happened.
This is kind of a big deal. Scientology has almost never been put on trial, and they're able to expertly keep themselves out of being the fall guy, and they just keep themselves out of the picture. And miraculously, by this incredible blunder, which we're going to discuss, by the defense attorney Tom Mazzaro introducing Scientology into the case, which doesn't make any sense, put a massive foot bullet in keeping Scientology out of it. So if you guys that are following along remember, the second episode that we did almost a year ago when I started this channel, contemplated, when this was starting to come out, that this might have a chance to do some serious damage to Scientology finally, because they're always able to keep themselves out of the picture. And so what's happening right now is a big deal. These gals have been trying to come forward for some time now. And if you're a Scientologist, you keep everything internally. You do not report rapes, crimes, or anything to police. You don't report your fellow Scientologists. It's a world within a world, a law within a law, and that's just the way it is. These are called high crimes in Scientology. So before we go further, let me give you a little bit of backstory on my relationship with the Mastersons themselves. So I never knew Danny Masterson. I would go to his cheesy parties when he would DJ under the moniker of DJ Donkey Punch. Look that up to see what that means. I would go to these stupid DJ parties that he'd put on, and the way I would describe these parties in general, these Scientology parties, is, again, I can only say this being out of it for over a decade and looking at it now, but there is a massive sense of evil. I'm sure this won't be a surprise to people watching, but to me it was, because I was used to being a Scientologist for most of my life. But looking back at it now, these parties and the kind of things that happened there were very dark and sinister. I didn't witness any sacrifices or murders or anything. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about the general vibe was very, as they would say in Scientology, down tone. I don't know how to describe it, man, but Scientologists are a different breed, and it's kind of a very traumatic, evil environment to exist in. Carol Masterson was my acting manager from around 2004-ish to 2007. I would go over and drop off headshots at her house, and she would send me out periodically on auditions. Carol Masterson is Danny Masterson's mother. Now, the Masterson family has several siblings, and it's a multi-generational Scientology family, so none of these people even had a chance. I'm not excusing, Danny's alleged behavior. But what chance did he have growing up as a Scientologist? Because I mentioned one of the first videos, it's literally a sociopath making machine. So if you weren't one before, you will be one 5 years deep. So there's also Chris Masterson in the family, who we briefly talked about. I met him one time when he came to a play that I did. Carol, his mother, brought him out to some fucking stupid play that I did back in 2005. And Alana Masterson, who is the stepsister of Danny, and Jordan Masterson, who's his stepbrother. It's very complicated. I don't want to get too deep, but those are the basic characters. Those two were in my acting class. The acting class was named Bobby Lyons. We talked about him in previous videos. It was almost a full-on Scientology class. Bobby himself was a Scientologist, and of course, Jordan and Alana were. Jordan Masterson was on some cheesy George Lopez show, and Alana Masterson was on The Walking Dead. Chris Masterson was on Malcolm in the Middle, and Danny Masterson is best known for That 70s Show and also The Ranch, which he was booted off of once these allegations started coming out. Let's continue on with this story, and we'll talk more about it as we go.
The Church of Scientology is not on trial, but it's played a key role in this preliminary hearing. All three women testified that it is a suppressive act in Scientology to report a fellow Scientologist to law enforcement.
Let's try to appreciate the situation that these gals were in by going to report an alleged rape at Scientology. Scientology indoctrinates you, and it's very, very convincing when you're in the Truman Show bubble that it is the greatest good for the entire planet and the only hope that mankind has. Once you buy into that, your family is in it probably, your friends, your whole life is immersed in this thing, and you never, ever, ever want to say anything negative about Scientology, anything negative about the leader, and you certainly wouldn't report a celebrity to the ethics section alleging rape. Julian Swartz, who is the ethics officer that dealt with this, said, "We don't mention the word rape." And this was turned around on the girls to make it their fault. What did you do to cause this situation? What did you do? It's always about inducing guilt. It's never the other person's fault. And let's listen to one of the gals, what she has to say, and we'll talk more about that specific subject.
Chrissy B., who gave Eyewitness News permission to use her first name and show her photos, testified that she told the church back in 2001, but says that she was put on an ethics program and told by a Scientology executive at the Celebrity Center that she had pulled in or caused the alleged rape.
One of the fundamental principles in Scientology, if not the core principle of Scientology, is something called magical thinking, or the law of attraction. You are God. Every thought that you entertain manifests, and if something went bad, it's because you're thinking wrong thoughts, either consciously or subconsciously. And if something great happens to you, you meet your soulmate, you win the lottery, it's because of your thoughts that you're entertaining. This is complete horseshit, by the way, but like a lot of things in Scientology and other cults, it can have some appeal, and then you buy into that, and then you get into something like what these gals face, what I've faced, what, every ex-Scientologist has faced, and that is, what did you do to pull it in? That's what Scientology, that's the phrase that they use to make everything your fault. So according to Scientology logic, if these gals were in fact raped, it's because of something they did, possibly in a past life, to pull that into them. That's actually the insane philosophy. So that's a huge part of this recurring, ever-repeating, self-reinforcing feedback loop trap, because rather than being able to break out of it and see it for what it is, the amount of guilt that stacks up on you by accepting responsibility for everything, including saving the planet, saving all you motherfuckers, is the kind of burden that you carry as a Scientologist. So with that frame of reference, let's go on to another point about what happens should you doubt Scientology, should you disobey or, heaven forbid, commit a high crime by reporting that you were allegedly raped. You'd think that a church would help you out with something like that and support you.
Jane Doe, too. I knew I'd be put through an ethics process and would be interrogated. Reporting other Scientologists in good standing to law enforcement is a high crime. All three women testified that they feared they would be declared a suppressive person by the church. They'd be excommunicated, lose their family and friends.
Well, that's exactly what happened to me and many other people who leave Scientology. I haven't spoken to my family or had contact with them for God knows how many years now. And, when you're immersed in this situation like these gals were, or you're born into it, you're second generation, which is what Danny's family was, it's so much a part of your life that to leave is tantamount to literally losing everything, including your mind and your self-identity, such as the indoctrination. So, when I look at my own life, and when my family got into Scientology, and I would reckon it's like this for other people in this situation, I was given a choice right out of the womb, basically. And it was either I'm going to wake up out of this trance and come out of this gaslighting, sociopathic creation known as Scientology, and therefore lose my family and my friends and everything and start over. Or for the rest of my life, I'm going to go under the radar, conform a little bit, or work around Scientology's rules. I personally was so offended when I woke up out of this at what I thought L. Ron Hubbard, you're told, is mankind's greatest friend. When I found out how much he lied, even that he lied a little bit, let alone almost everything he told was a lie, I personally was so pissed off and so offended by this fucker, and that I had fallen for this completely out of my awareness or consciousness, that I made a pact with myself right at the beginning. I don't give a fuck what I lose. No price is more important and more worth paying than having my fucking mind freed. I didn't know at the time I was going to lose my family. I did try to hang on to them. I did try to negotiate. Man, the best choice I ever made, just from my personal experience, everybody's is different, but leaving the cult, my family, and the entire toxic environment behind, only then was I able to actually start the healing process, because these motherfuckers would always pull me back in. I would compromise with my own morality and my own integrity to do what Scientology says. And regarding this case, when you look at this, what Scientology is, and these other cults, they're not the only offender. They're an institutionalized form of psychological and sometimes physical abuse. So to find all sorts of, as they would say, unethical things happening is part and parcel with being part of the cult. So Scientology covers up everything, and this case is no different. We talked about in an episode called The Bridge to Total Amnesia 2, a couple episodes back, about the contracts that they have you sign. So they're legally protected. And another thing is those pre-clear folders, which would have all the evidence that these gals reported on, if that was ever able to be brought into court, which David Miscavige and Scientology will do everything to prevent, and I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that alone shows you the cover-up, because all the files are there, and per those contracts that I showed you, Scientology owns those motherfuckers. They're not yours, and you can't put it as evidence into a court of law, to my understanding. So who knows what's going to happen with this whole thing? Sometimes I get excited because I'm like, wow, this could really break the institutionalized abuse and maybe creep Scientology into the scene and hold people accountable that were responsible for covering up this shit, this alleged stuff. So how does Scientology look at this? How do they see it? What's their side of defending against these allegations? Let's listen to part of the defense, Applebaum, basically speak in Scientology's terms, describing how they view this situation.
But Applebaum argued today that Scientology does not discourage its members from reporting fellow Scientologists. Quote, Scientologists are not anti-police. They just want a crime-free society.
Those two statements right there are straight out of a Scientology playbook, so much so they might as well have been written by Scientology and said by Scientology rather than the defense team. Scientology has something called telling an acceptable truth to the public. In other words, those weren't necessarily lies, but it's all in the wording. So they say that they're not anti-police, right? Well, they're not when they have them in their pocket and they have a whole infiltration technology on how to do that. They are against you if they want you to come forward with alleged crimes. Those are kept in-house. So Scientology's true goal, per L. Ron Hubbard's policy, is to take over the entire planet and make it run according to Hubbard's policy. That world, by the way, would look exactly like George Orwell's 1984. I can promise you that from personal experience. It's a total snitching culture. And imagine this, all the front groups that they have. They have one called Criminon, which deals with handling criminals, right? There's a lot to say about that one too. Now they want to handle criminals according to Criminon, Scientology policy. They have Narconon. They want to handle drug use according to Narconon or L. Ron Hubbard policy. Same difference. They want to infiltrate government and have the entire government run by L. Ron Hubbard policy. On and on it goes. That's what their front groups are for. And it's serious business, even though obviously Scientology has zero chance of taking over the world. I can tell you, you believe it when you're in that bubble. I thought we had millions of members, and my daily activity was spent constantly thinking about how to save this fucking planet. It's so stupid now, I realize, but man, like I said, those policies and that brainwashing, once they get inside your blood, take you over and you become a fanatic. You can't literally see the mind prison that was created. So that first statement that Applebaum made there is an acceptable truth, just like the second statement was. So he says that Scientologists are not discouraged from reporting on other Scientologists. No, they're not. They have something called KRs, or knowledge reports, which is a snitching culture I was talking about. I can't tell you how many knowledge reports I wrote on my own fucking family, my friends. I mentioned in one of the videos that my friend who snapped me out of this dropped off a cult book on my house, and I was going to go down to the church and report him or write a knowledge report on him. So anything that Scientologists see themselves doing that is out ethics, they report on each other. But like I said, it's all handled in-house. Especially the bigger crimes, you never go to authorities or the police. So it's a double standard with Scientology, and they have ways of using word magic and tricks of the word, like you just heard that lawyer make, that, are totally false. Now, let's move on to the massive foot bullet produced by defense attorney Tom Mazzaro when he dared introduce the Scientology Bible, called Introduction to Scientology Ethics book, into the proceedings. This book reads like something out of Mein Kampf rather than anything having to do with ethics.
This book by Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard, Introduction to Scientology Ethics, was used by both sides to argue about whether it's a suppressive act to report a fellow Scientologist to law enforcement.
Now, it's definitely going to require a separate video in order to break down this Introduction to Scientology Ethics book, which is not only the Bible of Scientologists, it's one of the biggest weapons that the cult has in its arsenal of brainwashing. Now, what this genius Mazzaro did of the defense is he tried to trip up one of the gals by grabbing the Introduction to Scientology Ethics book, opening it up to a certain page and saying to the gal, show me where it says that Scientologists are discouraged from reporting alleged crime to authorities. She couldn't find it. And what happened is, after cross-examination, the prosecutor then whisked over, picked up the book, opened it up to the appropriate passage where it indeed says that it's a high crime to report to authorities an alleged crime. Like I said, everything is kept in-house. This is one of the problems, too, about why Scientology is allowed to continue, because the general public and courts and everything, they're not hip to how cults and brainwashing and undue influence necessarily work and all the tricks and inner language and policies of a Scientologist. But luckily, it seems like the prosecutor is up to speed and new enough, because that wasn't easy, to be able to handle that situation and give Mazzaro the appropriate foot bullet as a result. This case is very complex. It's been going on for some time. The underground bunker has all the details, including the very disturbing testimony thus far from the alleged victims. So go check that out. That's not the point of this video. I just wanted to give you some of my thoughts and ideas about, what I thought about this. Now, the reason this is a huge foot bullet and why David Miscavige is probably beating somebody up right now because this happened is because they do not want Scientology in the trial whatsoever. They were given a little bit of leeway to talk about it as to why the gals were gaslit into and fair game and all this stuff, allegedly, in order, there's a whole procedure you have to go through about figuring out that Scientology is corrupt. Then you have to try to survive their alleged fair gaming and all sorts of shit in order to even come to that maybe something bad actually happened to you. The whole idea is that Scientology needs to stay as far away from this case as possible, according to cult leader Miscavige. And the fact that this was brought up, probably directed by him, is not something that Scientology wants to do. So it was determined that there was enough testimony given by these gals to proceed forward to trial. So Danny's going to have to stand trial. So this is where we're at in this fiasco.
In the end, Judge Almeida found the victim's testimony, quote, credible and sufficient to support the charges, and specifically said that Scientology's policies do discourage reporting to police.
Well, my friends, this probably won't be the last time that we talk about the Danny Masterson trial and what develops, because it's going to be very interesting as this goes to trial, watching it all. Knowing Scientology, absolutely fucking anything is possible. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you have anything you'd like to say, please don't hesitate to drop a line in the comments. We can cover them in these cult clips. And the next episode that we're doing on the Raising a Secret Society series is part 2 of the last episode that was called The Summer of Psyops. And if you'd like to be notified, if you like this kind of content, please like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you on the other side. How does Danny Masterson think that he'll fare in this particular trial? He thinks his chances are fan-fucking-tastic.
Anything at all? Like, how are you feeling about your chances coming up?
I feel fantastic.